JavaScript is sometimes called an object-oriented programming language, but also it can be called a functional language, and that's because most of the processes in it are created through the use of functions. Now, we've actually already been using functions a lot throughout the projects that we've done so far. We've used the alert function to alert somebody to some text, and we've used the log function to log some text. Now, the thing is, right now both of these look about the same, but we know that most of the time we actually have to send the log function to a specific target, and that's the console. It turns out we could be sending the alert somewhere too, and that would be the window. But most of the time we just use the alert by itself. You see, the log in this instance is what's known as a method, and the alert in this instance is what's known as a function, but technically they're both the same bit of code in the back end. Really, the only difference is that one can be used by itself, and one has to be used by attaching it to an object. And when a function is attached to an object, it's called a method. So essentially, all methods are functions, but not all functions are methods. It's about time that we talk about making our own functions, and why somebody ever would make a function. Let's see if we can figure out an example of why this would be a good idea. I'm going to write out a long phrase here, and it's going to allow me to change the background color of the document. That's a whole lot. Well, that's a whole lot for what we've done so far. It's actually not a whole lot in terms of some of the things that you'll do later on in programming. But for right now, that's a long line. What if we wanted to change this color to a couple of different things at different times in our script? Maybe one time we wanted it to be blue, and one time we wanted it to be green, and one time we wanted it to be red. We would have to copy this each single time, and each time we did it, we would have to rewrite this code, and that's a whole lot of code. And if we ever wanted to change it, it could be very difficult to change, especially if we used this many times. That's one of the reasons that we create functions. Functions allow us to reuse code. They also allow us to do calculations and neat stuff like that. There's other reasons, but one of the main reasons that we create custom functions is for reusing code. Let's talk about the basic functionality of making a function. And we're going to use this as a backup, and we're going to come back to this example. So I'm just going to comment it out for right now. Making a function is not hard, but there are two different ways to do it. One is the simplified format, and one is a format that I'm going to kind of insist that you use. And I'll explain why after I've shown you both of them. The basic way to create a function is to use the function command. And after you've used the function command, come up with a function name, such as myfunc, and then have a space to give the function a couple of parameters, and then have a space to give the function its commands. Let's go back over these parts. Function, in this case, is a command to JavaScript that what we're about to do is create a function. myfunc here is a completely arbitrary name that we're making up right now. Capitalization and all of that doesn't necessarily matter, except that we're consistent when we use it. Inside of the parentheses here, this should look familiar to you, seeing as we've used methods and functions before. And whenever we wanted to tell the function what to do, we always put it inside of the parameters. Likewise, when we create a function, or I should say oppositely, when we create a function, we actually have to tell the function what parameters it wants to accept. Now, not all functions do accept parameters. Some of them just work. We'll discuss that a little bit later. After that come the curly braces. And the curly braces indicate where you're going to tell the function actually what it does. So this is where you're going to put commands. Something as simple as, oh, I don't know, document.body.style.background color equals blue. This is a complete function right here. This function will work. If I was to save this document right now and go into Chrome, I could actually run this function. Let me show you. I'm going to save my document. I'm going to pop into Chrome and refresh this page. And now what I should be able to do is call the myfunc function. And when I do, the background turns blue. What's great is now I can call this over and over again, and it doesn't take up very much code at all. But simple functions like this aren't the be-all and end-all. You can also do more complicated things. For instance, what if I wanted to change the color of the background to something random at different times, maybe on a whim? Well, at that point, this function right now always uses the color blue. But I could modify this function just a little bit by using a parameter. A parameter, sometimes called an argument, allows you to accept user input or even program input when the function is called. This could be as simple as something as a color. When you want to define a parameter to be received, you can do it by merely typing in a variable name right here. Now, when you create parameters or arguments right here, you're creating something that's going to be accepted later and used inside of the commands. But what's nice is you don't have to use the var command. It's already assumed that you're creating a variable here. So you can just do something like color and then use it inside of your commands. Essentially now, this function, whenever it's called, assumes that it's going to be given a value, hopefully a color, because it's going to again then use that whatever value it's given as the background color for the page. So now, if I save and reopen my document and refresh, I can call the myfunc again, but if I just call it regularly, nothing happens. However, if I call myfunc with red, now I can change the background color, but I can change it again too. And because of the way I did it, I can even use things like hexadecimal. This is powerful. I now have the option to change the background color in a simple and concise way whenever I want. Even better, I can do more, lots more. But this is enough for now. I want you all to go ahead and make yourself your own function. Understand a couple of things. One, that it has to have the function command here. It has to have a unique name. Every function has to have a unique name. It doesn't have to have parameters, but if you give it one, understand that the name of this parameter here is going to be unique to this function. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then don't forget to put all of your commands inside of the two curly braces. I suppose it's also worth mentioning here that all of this could have been done on one line. We've discussed white space before, but it's worth mentioning again here that most of the white space in this section can be reduced down to nothing, and this whole thing will still work. There's only one bit of white space that's important, and it's the one between function and the name of my function. That one white space there is the only thing that actually needs to be there. Everything else can be 50 lines or no lines or no space, but this one space has to be there. So go ahead and make your own function, and when you're ready, click to continue.